think that in order to sell a book, you need to tell them why it's better than the other books out there. And that is so not the case. I want to praise the genre so that they are sufficiently enthused about its potential as a continued moneymaker to want to buy my book and add it to that genre. So here's how I got my first agent. I was a nonfiction guy for 25 years, didn't use an agent for any of that. Mostly college textbooks, martial arts books, which are small money, so an agent wouldn't be involved. When I wrote my first novel, I figured I needed an agent. So I asked my friends who had agents what their approach was, like what kind of agent should I get? Don't write this down because it's really bad advice, but it's very common advice that I got. A lot of them said, get a low-level agent because they're the only ones who are going to be willing to take a flyer on a new writer. And I thought, wow, that is spectacularly shitty advice because essentially what it says is, I am mediocre, damn it, and I'm going to defend my mediocrity. That is not good business. You don't, like, if I was trying to sell this cell phone, I wouldn't say, yeah, it's not bad. It's not bad is not what's going to get you to drop money on this cell phone. So why would I say that? I would tell you about what it does well, all the things it will do for you. I want to praise it. I don't want to make claims that I can't support, but I want to make claims that really, make a statement about it. So I figured pitching to a low-level agent was a bad policy. Because if I got one, I'm not saying low-level agents are not good, but if I got one, they would not have the right people on speed dial. Because an agent is only as good as his or her contacts. So if they can't make a call and get a senior editor at Simon & Schuster or Macmillan or someone on the phone, then they're as much of an outsider as I am. They're not necessarily geared up for the kind of career that I want. I don't want my career to be something you've never heard of. I wanted to sell books and try to make a living off of it. I know writers making a living. It's a novelty. It actually does happen sometimes. So I went the other direction. I went in the direction of audacity sells. That was my philosophy. So I looked up the 10 agents, and in one case a lawyer, who represented the authors that were the top in the genre in which my book would be placed. My first novel was Ghost Road Blues. It was a horror novel set in rural Pennsylvania. So I wanted writers, or wanted agents who represented writers who had novels that were set in the American Gothic sort of genre. So I went after the lawyer representing Stephen King, because he didn't use an agent, the agent representing Dean Koontz, Robert McCammon, Peter Straub, and those guys. And yes, that's audacious. And I wrote one hell of a query letter, because writing a good query letter is the most important piece of writing you're going to do when you go from art to business. Now, I don't have that original query letter with me, because unfortunately, but I do have one that I wrote for Patient Zero. And I'm going to read this query to you. Patient Zero is my fourth novel. It was the first of my thriller series, weird science thrillers, different company. And at the time, even though it was my fourth novel, I still had to kind of pitch. And this is written as if to an agent. So this is a version redone to combine elements from my original query that I got my agent with, and but the theme of the new book, of the book that I was selling at the time. It's important to pay attention to the elements of it. So I'm going to read the query, and it's to Joe Bloggs, fake agent. By the way, this has been tweaked by about a dozen agents of various kinds, and about 15 editors, so that this is essentially what they want to see come across their desk. So it reads, Mr. Bloggs, if you have to kill the same terrorist twice in 1 week, there's either something wrong with your skills or something wrong with the world, and there's nothing wrong with Joe Ledger's skills. Patient Zero is a mainstream thriller in which a Baltimore cop is recruited by a secret government organization to help stop a group of terrorists from releasing a plague that can turn people into murderous zombies. The story is grounded in hard, but very scary, science, and follows Joe Ledger as he goes from a cop with a troubled past to a hero leading a unit of first-team shooters against the world's deadliest threat. Joe Ledger and the DMS, the Department of Military Sciences, would immediately excite readers of James Rollins' Sigma 6 novels, Vince Flynn's Mitch Rapp series, Lee Child's Jack Reacher books. Joe Ledger is a hero with a heart, conflicted, compassionate, idealistic, and extremely dangerous. Patient Zero is a standalone novel with serious potential. It's a fast-paced, character-driven, high-concept thriller that pits Joe Ledger and the DMS against terrorists with cutting-edge bioweapons. He's the hero we need for these troubled times. Patient Zero is 140,000 words and ready for immediate mailing. I'd be happy to send a synopsis, sample chapters, or the complete manuscript, along with a competitive analysis that clearly shows how strong and active the genre is and has been. I'm experienced and active in social networking, and which will allow me to be an active participant in co-promotion using Facebook, Twitter, podcasting, blogs, websites, forums, and other forms of viral marketing to help buzz for this book. Although this novel can stand alone as a solo adventure, I have outlines for additional potential stories. I would also be willing to write short stories or novellas tied to Patient Zero that can be posted as ebooks to help cultivate and maintain readership. I'm extremely active in social media, and will use those platforms to support my books. Your own remarkable track record with thrillers of every stripe is impressive, and you've done so well with bestsellers as well as first-time authors such as Joe Schmo, Jane Doe, and Bessie T. Summer. And it's clear you get this genre. I look forward to hearing from you via email. Sincerely, John Maberry. Now, there's a lot to unpack in this query. It fits into one page. My first query was actually paper, back when you sent paper queries, back when dinosaurs ruled the earth. However, as an email, it would also print out to one page. And that's one of the important things. There are these little hurdles they want you to jump through. And they expect you to jump through them well and with a degree of style. They do not want the iconoclast who's going to do something radically different with the form, because you don't approach business in a way that makes it inconvenient for them to grasp what you're doing. So this is a simple business letter. Yes, it shows my enthusiasm for the genre and for the book. Yes, it shows my understanding of the genre, but it also talks about the deliverables. The word count, never fudge on that. You can round it up to the nearest 10,000. If it's below 100,000 words, round it to the nearest 5,000. If it's above 100,000 words, balance it to the nearest 10,000. It also talks about my social media presence, which is really important because ever since the economic downturn, and actually slightly before that, publishers have pulled a lot of money out of promotion. And they can do that knowing that we will do it for them, for us. So social media, if a writer is not present in social media, if they're not active in social media, it's kind of a tacit statement that they don't really know anything about how books are promoted these days. It is, my own agent, for example, she's now one of the top agents in the business. She's the #1 YA agent, and she's also big in thrillers. She won't even take a client who doesn't have a social media presence. In fact, when the email, well, if she gets an email, that's okay, email, but she wants to see some sort of tags in there, like my automatic signature in my emails has my website, my Facebook, and my Twitter addresses. I can be found on social media. She will actually go look to see if somebody is there or have her assistant do it to make sure that person in fact does have a social media presence. If they don't, the query is never going to get read. And I agree with it. It sounds harsh, but I agree with it because it shows that the person doesn't understand the way publishing works now. It would be nice if we could just write a book, send it in, and make $1 million and retire in a cabin by the lake. That'd be great. That's never fucking happened. In the history of writing, that's never happened. It's what you see in montages in movies where they talk about the writer's life, where everything goes great. No, it doesn't. You have to work at it. Things can go well. I grew up poor in Philadelphia. I live in a condo over the Pacific in Southern California now. Things can go really well, but you have to work it, and it's smart business decisions that get you there. So my social media presence is pretty substantial. I actually use 10 minutes out of every hour of my writing day, and I write full time, 10 minutes out of every hour to do social media. I set a clock for, actually set my Alexa for it now. And I'll stop writing, even if it's in the middle of a sentence. I'll go over and do Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or LinkedIn or something, and then I'll come back and write again. And because of that, I'm constantly driving my social media footprint and building a brand too. And if we have time, we can talk about brands. If not, I'll fold it into my keynote. So any thoughts or questions about the query?
It sounded, as much as it was about the story, it was as much about the business. The sort of relative weight distribution between what you were doing there. The first bit, you enticed with...
Good hook.
Right? You enticed
It's actually
them.
the first line of the book now.
Yeah, so, and then you go through the story, the main characters, what the situation is, and then the rest of it is, this is how we
Right.
immediately you said, we're doing this together, not what I expect you to do, but we're doing this.
Yes, and that's really important for them to know that you don't consider yourself a passenger, that you're driving the ship too, because they need you to be able to partner with them. Yes?
That was for your fourth book?
Yeah, but it's built on the structure of what I used for my first book.
Well, what I'm wondering is, if you're starting, are you supposed to say something about yourself?
Notice that there's no
Process.
credentials in here at all.
Yeah.
I deliberately did this so it can be useful to people who have no publishing credentials.
Okay.
If you have credentials, then of course you fold that in somewhere. You talk about your hits. When I did nonfiction, I always talked about my author's platform. When I did a series of mass market nonfiction books about martial arts. So I talked about my credentials in that. I've been doing martial arts for 50 some years, and have certain rank, et cetera, because that establishes platform. However, the last 6 nonfiction books I did, I had no platform to support them. They were on the folklore of the supernatural, the folklore and legends of vampires, werewolves, and so on. I have no credentials. I'm not a philosopher. I don't have a degree in anthropology or folklore. So I left the credentials out. When I wrote my first novel, I had no fiction credits at all. And I didn't want to confuse the issue with my nonfiction credits because they were all small press books. And if they, even though yes, the publishing credits, a textbook doesn't have the numbers that's going to excite someone who wants to represent a novel. Because if you sell 5,000 copies of a judo textbook over X number of semesters, that's not a runaway bestseller, and they'll be hung up on the 5,000, and they won't move from there. Just like if I was pitching a novel now, and the only thing I had done was my anthologies never sell as well as novels do. I mean, I may sell 600,000 copies of a novel, but I might sell 25,000 copies of an anthology. I'm not going to use the anthology numbers to try to get me my next book deal, next novel deal. So I left it out. But if you have publishing credits in fiction, short story credits are excellent to put in there. And I had no short story credits when I started my fiction. My first short story came out as I was pitching this, in fact. So I didn't have that credit, so I didn't include it. But if I did now, short story credits really help because they don't hold the numbers of the book against you. The fact that it's in there, and especially if it's in an anthology or a magazine where there are notable names, like some of the anthologies I'm in, I was in midway through where I started and where I am now, might have the names that you see on the cover, like 4 or 5 names, and others. Mm-hmm. Those 4 or 5 names means that you are in that group. If it's Stephen King or Neil Gaiman, it's fame by association. So if you're in the anthology, had those guys, it makes you look like you made the cut. So it helps. Yes.
Yes, when obviously the publishers and agents get quite a few queries at one time. How do you make your queries stand out so they want to read yours as opposed to the $200 or $300?
Okay. By having a really good tagline, having a really good opening line. My agent's assistant has to read about 300 queries a day.
Right.
She is taught to. She has a list of things that she was taught to look for. First, if it's an email, well, it's all emails now. She'll scroll down to the signature bar to see if there's social media. Then she goes up to read the first line. If the first line is compelling, she'll read the next. She'll scan down sometimes to see if the deliverables are there, the length of the book, the genre, etc. If they're not in there, she probably won't actually read the body of the email. If she can scan down and see those things, she'll go back up to the top and then read the query. So it's a process of elimination. Also, if the font is wrong, I know there are in a print it should be Times New Roman or Courier, nothing else. I've seen queries in script, I've seen queries in comic, I've seen, no, they're not used in publishing. Publishing is Times New Roman and, to a lesser degree, Courier.
And what, 12, 15?
12. Now, sometimes I'll drop it down to 11, like I think this is 11, because I wanted to fit it on one page. But it's 12, generally, single-spaced. The format, each paragraph is separated in the query, not in the story. Left justified query, justified, and with a space between each paragraph. Format marks you as a pro. If you're going outside the accepted format, they're saying, well, this person's not a pro, or this person, it may be so small press that they don't understand what the big houses use. And if you use the industry standard of the big houses, it works with the small houses. But if you're using the standard of the small houses, it won't work with the big houses. And it's kind of like a business card. A cheap business card looks like a cheap business card. And actually, by the way, that's a little thing I'll throw in here. I always recommend having your face on a business card. It's not that much extra in the cost. It's worth doing. Cut out a couple of cups of coffee that week at Starbucks. My card, every time I order new cards, which is about every 3 weeks, I change the photo on my card. I also have all my I have my published works on the back. I have my website and my business phone, my email address, and everything else on the card. It is impossible not to find me easily with the information on this card. And as a result, this is like carrying around a website in a way. It has all the information you need to get an idea of who I am, to remember who I am, because faces matter, and to know what I do. And so it becomes a very, and this is, by the way, a design I stole from someone else. Lee Child had a business card like this. And I thought that was smart as hell. So within a week, I had a business card like this. And it's plastic coated on both sides, so it's nice, good quality card. It looks expensive, and it's not that bad. There's a guy up in Clinton, New Jersey, who does these for me. You can email me, and I'll put you in touch with him. He gives good rates for writers, especially if they drop my name.
Okay.
And as a result, it's a quality card that looks like some expense and time was put into it, and that makes a statement as well. Because it is a lot about making statements. It's business. If you show up to a business meeting in cut-off shorts, flip-flops, and so on, they're not going to take you as seriously as if you show up in a Brooks Brothers suit, depending on the business. Writers' conferences, we show up dressed however. But you're dressed nice. I'm in a Hawaiian shirt. Yeah.
How important is it in the pitch to mention potential of another book?
I like that idea because here's the thing. I don't want to close a one-book deal. I want to close a two-book deal, minimum. So even though I didn't actually have ideas for the next 2 books, because I really thought it was going to be a standalone, at very least I wanted them to offer me a 2-book deal for a standalone and something else. As it turned out, we got a 3-book deal on this.
Because you kind of hinted at it in there.
Yeah,
but you didn't.
with the golden line is it's a standalone with series potential. Because you do want the book to stand alone, because if there's a cliffhanger ending on the first novel by a new writer, you're not going to touch it. If it is, however, a book that can stand on its own, a good example is, have you guys ever read the Harry Potter books? Okay. Each one of them is part of a clear series, but each one can stand on its own. You can read Prisoner of Azkaban, you can read Goblet of Fire. They're self-contained stories. Yes, there are through lines, but the self-contained story allows you to read that book by itself. It's also more satisfying to a reader who doesn't have to wait a year to find out what the hell happens. Yes, dedicated readers will sometimes reread the book before they read the new one, but you want to be a casual reader to be able to come in anywhere. Now, one thing about the query, sometimes, like these days, I don't need to write queries anymore. I'm writing my 32nd novel now, so I don't need to write queries anymore. Most often, at this point, I have to give a 1-sentence or 2-sentence pitch to my agent, and then she sells it. But if I go outside of my framework, outside of my box, sometimes I actually have to give a couple of paragraphs to my agent so that she can then shop it. And what's interesting is the paragraph. I have a book coming out in March. This is an advanced reading copy. My actual pitch became the jacket text, word for word, without change. I'll read it to you. Glimpse, a chilling thriller that explores what happens when reality and nightmares converge. Rain Thomas is a mess. 7 years an addict and 3 difficult years clean, racked by guilt for the baby she gave up for adoption when she was 16, still grieving for the boy's father who died in Iraq, alone, discarded by her family, with only the damaged members of her Narcotics Anonymous meeting as friends, them and the voices in her head. One morning, on the way to a much-needed job interview, she borrows reading glasses to review her resume. There's a small crack in one lens, and through that damaged slice of glass, she sees a young boy go running up the aisle of the subway train. Is he screaming with laughter, or just screaming? When she tries to find the boy, he's gone, and no one has seen him. The day spins out of control. Rain loses whole chunks of time. The voices she hears are telling her horrible things. And Dr. Nine, a spectral boogeyman conjured in drug-induced hallucinations, is now hunting her in the real world. Dr. Nine is also chasing that boy, a boy who looks so much like Rain's dead boyfriend. Unsure whether she's insane or if the world itself is broken, Rain begins a mother's quest for her lost child through a world where reality and nightmare are in head-on collision. How far will one person go to save someone they love? Now that was my pitch. I gave that to my agent, and word for word becomes the jacket text. So that's actually a good idea, that your pitch should read like jacket text. To a great degree, the Patient Zero jacket text is that. Slightly little different, but the opening line is the same, and a lot of the other structures are the same. And I find it helps to read jacket texts on books that you enjoy, books that were bestsellers, and then use those as kind of models for building the first couple of paragraphs of your query letter. This book, by the way, it says comes out in March. The jacket text has been pushed around so much by my publisher, my editor, my agent, that we actually have substantial TV interest in this, even though the book's not out yet. So that stuff has a lot of life to it. Can really get you, can kind of prime the pump for when your book actually comes out, even if it's your first book. And a good example of that is Suzanne Collins with The Hunger Games. The movie was in production before the book came out, because the jacket text got out, and people said, "Wow, this sounds amazing," and it got bought by Lionsgate, and they went. The book launched in the, I think, either number 1 or number 2 spot, and became a huge success in print and in film. But it was her first novel, So if you write good jacket text and include that as your opening and query in slightly modified form, you have a good chance of launching something pretty big. So let's talk about the face-to-face query. Now, as I said, I got my agent through query letters, but what I did is I was living in Philadelphia at the time before I moved to California, and I got, out of the 10 queries I sent, I got 6 go-aheads to submit partials or false. It said, if you write a good query, you get more response. And I think for some of them might even have been the audacity of, who the hell is this guy pitching to me? I'm top of the game in agenting, and who's this guy? So audacity can sometimes sell, because it suggests that you have confidence without necessarily an overblown ego attached to your work. Because none of these claims are indefensible. I never say it's better than anyone else's book. And I've seen, by the way, my agent has shown, agents love comparing or sharing queries with each other. They don't generally compare the good ones. Like, she has one framed in her office where somebody was trying to pitch a paranormal romance novel, and they said, if you, like me, think Twilight sucks, you'll love my book.
Wow.
Now, here's the reason that's stupid. Even if you didn't like Twilight, and by the way, none of us are 11-year-old girls, which is the target demographic for that book, so our opinion doesn't really hold water. But even if you didn't like it, and if you thought it was poorly written, Twilight, between the books and the movies, brought billions, that's a B, into the entertainment industry. I'm pretty sure that none of us are going to bring billions into the entertainment industry. So, and everyone in the entertainment industry, everyone in the publishing world who has published a paranormal romance since has benefited from the celebrity of Twilight. Even if they're publishing adult stuff, it reinvigorated the genre tremendously. So you're going to start off by insulting one of the most massive money-making books of all time? Why not just take your book and run it through a shredder? It'll have about the same effect.
I think one of the things you said early on to interject was you want to praise the genre.
praise the genre.
Yes, praise the genre, yeah.
Yeah, so I talk about James Rollins' books and Vince Flynn's books and Lee Child's books because they're the kings of the thriller genre. Whether someone likes the books or not. Now, if I was pitching this 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I'd have pitched Da Vinci Code. Another book that got a lot of hatred from people. They say it's not well written, it's not this, it's not that. It's sold nearly more, it's in like the top 5 single novels that have sold the most of any fiction in the English language in history. Be with that for a minute. In history. That book was massively popular. And because of that book, you can look at the history of bestsellers. After Da Vinci Code, thrillers went onto the top of the bestseller list and lived there. Almost every week, at least 6, if not more, of the bestsellers are thrillers. And you can track that back to Da Vinci Code. It made the genre massively successful. Yes, there were other big thriller writers before that, but that book caught the cultural zeitgeist, and everyone was reading thrillers, not just the thriller audience. And then, as a result, it expanded the thriller audience. And yet people will take swings at Da Vinci Code in their queries. Are you out of your goddamn mind? Seriously, what can you be thinking? So don't do that. So some of the verbal pitches. So when I had the opportunity to go up to when I had my partials or fulls accepted, I broke one of the rules of publishing where they say don't contact the editor the agent until they've had time to read it. Waiting 3 months for someone to respond to a pitch. Is there any other business where that would be acceptable? Seriously, any other business? If I was selling carpets, I wouldn't show you a sample and then say, get back to me in 90 days. No. So why would I want some agent to hold on to my book for 90 days and not respond to me? That's stupid. It became what was done, but it shouldn't be what is accepted. So I just didn't accept it. Audacity sells. So I emailed the agents who had the book, and I said, look, I'm going to be in New York next week. How about I swing by, take you out to lunch, we'll see if we can do business together. Now, a couple things about that. As short a phrase as that was, there's also a lot to unpack there too. I'm going to be in New York on business. A lie. Technically not, because that was the business I was going to New York for. Second, I'd like to swing by and take you out to lunch. Bribery of an acceptable kind. And third, let's see if we can do business together. At no point am I asking, have you read my book? Do you like my book? Because that's irrelevant to this phase of that conversation. At the time, I had to borrow money to go to New York and take them out because I was broke. I had to actually borrow money to do it. Each week, I took a different agent out, and I studied their histories. I used Publishers Marketplace, which is a marvelous resource. It's one of the very few pay sites that I agree with, but it tracks nearly all of the deals in publishing. Publishersmarketplace.com tracks all the deals in publishing. You get a tremendously great newsletter every day that talks about the deals and also about business. And you can track the histories of different agents and also the works that they represented and how well they did. So it's really smart. And I was a good student, so I did my homework. So every time I went up there, I crammed on that agent's history. I was more conversant with their history probably than their own boss was. So on the third time, I took this agent out, and I had a bit of a surprise because she had been representing Tom Clancy and Deepak Chopra and Dean Koontz. What I didn't know was that she was only representing the foreign rights for them as an assistant to a much bigger agent, John Silverside, at Trident. Okay, no problem. She's still with Trident, which is one of the biggest agencies. Took her out to lunch, and when I got to the agency, she said, look, I can give you 40 minutes. Now, what that told me is I haven't read much of your book, but I need to eat. Now, I don't hold it against somebody if they haven't read the book. I know how many books an agent would get. The fact that she was willing to meet me at all meant that she had read enough of my book to realize I knew what the hell I was doing, and my business correspondent did not make me look like an action writer.
Little things.
It is the little things.
The little things.
You only have one chance to make a first impression, right? So, essentially. So we went out to lunch at a place. The prices on the menu made my DNA hurt. I mean, it was really expensive. And I'm thinking how many favors I have to call in later on just to, So, and we sat down. At no point during the discussion did I bring up my book. what I did is I talked about the market, because I read all the newsletters. There are a lot of free newsletters out there. Publishers Weekly has like 6 free newsletters you can read, really understand about the business. Email newsletters. And I also talked about the books she had represented, including some that I really liked, and one that she had represented that had gotten good advance reviews but died here. And I said to her at one point, I'm really surprised that this book by Seamus McCullough didn't do better, because he's an Irish writer, and I thought with Ian Rankin and some of the other writers here that he would have been more well received. Maybe it's just a little too rural for the American audience. And she said, yeah, I love the book, but and it was a tough sell within the agency, but it didn't do much, Now, what that does, that's me saying that I know you're not perfect. And I knew at least one failure of each of the agents I was meeting, by the way. If you can cite something that they did that didn't come off right, but you're clearly not holding them against them, the natural human reaction is to counter that with the things that she has done. But then this book, and then she starts talking about the book she sold that did really well. And at that point, she is selling herself to me. That's business. So you let them become the negotiator on your behalf in this discussion. We were at that table for 4.5 hours. So much for the 40 minutes. See, I don't. When somebody says something in business, I never take it personally. I let it go through the filter in my head, the translator of 40 minutes means I can only talk about what I've read for about 40 minutes, or probably 20 minutes with 20 minutes eating. And if we have to go longer, it's going to be clear I haven't read your book. So I don't put her on the spot about that. It was only later, and we start talking about what I wanted to do as a writer. I didn't really talk my book yet. I kept talking about, the fact that that's when I talked about my credentials, my nonfiction background. I talked about teaching, because I had been a college teacher for a while. And I talked about how I love moving around to different genres. The first books are horror, and I think I want to write maybe a thriller next, or a mystery or something. And that was me finding out if she's going to be capable of handling wherever I go. By the end of that discussion, and the check was on the table, by the way. By the end of the discussion, I knew that if I reached for the check, conversation's over. If she said something like, well, this has been great, or something, the conversation's over. So I when I kind of felt the rhythm kind of dying down, I started reaching for the check. She snatched it up and said, oh no, our clients don't pay. Great line. And there is not one chance in hell she made that up on the spot. As I found out later, it was John Silversack's famous closer of a line when he met potential clients. And she stole it from him. Because she wanted to regain the power in that moment by making the statement that I was now a client. Fantastic. And that was how I got my agent. And we've been together for 11 years now, 12 years now. And she sold, other than the 32 novels that I've already written or writing, she's also sold 9 more that I've yet to write. She's handled my comic book work, novellas, and she helped me find film agents, because I have 2 film agents, for one for adult stuff and one for teen stuff. She's guided my career, and I've guided hers. We've worked together. Neither puts the other on a pedestal. We have conversations about best business practices, business strategies. And as a result, she's making an enormous amount of money, even though it's 15% of what I make, because that's what an agent does. You get 15%. So it's been on her to make sure that my income from each book is such that her 15% matters. It wasn't very big on our first book. It's gotten bigger since, and that's how we've worked our career. I don't badger her if she has a hard time selling, or if she has to deal with other clients. Like one of our clients had a movie that was, about to be released, and she was traveling with him for the release of the movie. All right, that's not the time for me to call her twice a day. Yeah, that'd be dumb. I don't want to pressure her, because I'm not the only person she has. It's not all about me. It's about our shared and overlapping careers. So if you're going to do, time flies fast. If you're going to do a verbal pitch at a conference, that's a slightly different animal, because they don't know you from a can of paint when you first walk in. And depending on the conference, they may give you a couple of minutes up to, I've seen conferences as much as 20 minutes. 20 minutes is too long, by the way. I like doing a pitch fast. So we're gonna try an experiment. Give me a genre, any genre of fiction.
Western.
Western. Give me a subgenre of Western. Because there's literary Western, action Westerns, you know, et cetera, et cetera.
Literary.
All right, literary Western. So we're talking Larry McMurtry sort of Western. Give me the name of the main character.
Heather.
Heaven?
Heather.
Heather, okay. Main character is Heather. Give me a crisis in a literary Western.
She's gonna lose the range.
Going to lose the ranch. Okay. That's a challenge because it's a cliche crisis, but you can always, cliches don't matter as long as you put a nice spin on them. So that's good. That's good. All right, and give me a title.
When the Doves Died.
When the Doves Died. Okay. Hey, Lonesome Dove was a literary Western, so. Heather. Okay, since you come up with the title, I'll give it to you. Heather McDonald has been living on this farm her whole life. Her mother was born there, and she wants her kids to be born there. The farm is her life. It's the kind of life that she really wants. She doesn't want to live in towns. She doesn't want to go back to where her grandmother came from in New York City. She's a farm girl. She's a cowgirl, and she's got all these heads of cattle, and she's going to lose her dream. Everything she's worked for, everything her parents worked for and died for, is about to be gone. Because the railhead is not coming to her town as promised. It's going 40 miles away. And the farms around there are going to get fat, and they're going to get rich, and the promises made to her are going away. And the problem for her, other than the loss of money, the loss of her hopes, is the guy she loves, Ronald. He actually wants that railhead over by his brother's place. He's broken her heart and also shattered her dreams by moving it over there. She has to convince him that the railhead should come to her farm, or at very least between the two, build a bigger community. And it's a fight that she feels she's losing. And if she loses her farm, she loses her family legacy, and she loses the man she loves. She'll lose everything, and she'll hate herself for it. When the Doves
Die.
When the Doves Die is a literary Western, 150,000 sprawling words, with all of the rich texture of the Old West. Not the TV Old West, the real Old West. Dirty, smelly, beautiful. Vast open prairies, the feel of getting your hands dirty every day, of going out and being part of something every day, of actually feeling your world shape itself under your own hands. That's her world. And she can't lose it. The book is ready for an immediate mailing, and it will definitely appeal to the readers of Larry McMurtry, and also the readers of the Western romance genre, which has gotten really big over the last few years. It's the kind of book that draws in readers of all kinds. Anyone who loves a good romance, loves a good Western, loves to know that the lives of real people in unusual circumstances, and also to look behind the Hollywood version of something to the truth. This book would appeal to so many readers, and it's ready for an immediate mail. Okay, so I might actually write that. I like the story. There are some tricks I used in that. What did I deconstruct that pitch? What was in that pitch? Start with how I said it.
Used words that connoted the genre.
Definitely connoted the genre. I wouldn't use words that would make it sound like a thriller, for example. It's not. What else?
You talked about the character and her obstacle.
Yeah, it's always about the character. I mean, high concept is great, but it's all about the character's experience and the conflict with that character and anyone who matters to her. And in this one, you had her family, the family legacy, and the guy who is, very likely to turn out to be a real bastard if he cares more about his own money than hers. Now, if it was a longer pitch, I might have gone into what forces are at work in his life, because maybe he has a good reason. Maybe he has a good reason to want to move it somewhere else. Maybe he, why is it worth breaking her heart to do this? So in a longer pitch, I would have gone into those things. What else? What about the way I said it? Because there's a lot of theater tricks in that.
Well, it's conversational. You're not reciting it, you're in a conversation with the person
Yes.
drawing them in.
Anytime you memorize a pitch, it shows. And there are agents, like my friend Sharia Bukowski, she loves doing this. She loves interrupting people in the middle of a pitch because it throws them off. And if they go back to where they left off in the memorized pitch, she's gone. They've lost her. She's off thinking about what she's going to watch on Netflix, and she's just nodding. She's not really there. Also, in the memorized pitch, you can't give into inspiration. Because sometimes the way somebody's reacting to you makes you say it differently. So you want to be able to roll with that. And you should be enough of an expert on your own material to be able to come into that story anywhere. And this is a funny thing because most people have no idea at all what the hell they're writing. They don't know their genre, certainly don't know their subgenre, and they can't come up with 5 bullet-pointed essential points about what their story's about. And yet you should know that backward and forward, because who knows the book better than the person who's spent hundreds or thousands of hours on it. One thing I recommend you do, you take my business card before you leave, email me, and put C3 in the subject bar. I'll send you this zip file that has this query, plus tons of other files, including some that I lifted from someone else, I do cite the source, that have like romance, all the subgenres, science fiction, all the subgenres, and so on. So it helps you know where the placement of the book is. Because when you're pitching, you don't want to be vague. You want to be very precise. By citing Larry McMurtry, I can cite 10 action Western writers, but with literary Western, it starts with Larry McMurtry. He's the guy. You know, like how many of you know who wrote True Grit? No. But you know Larry McMurtry, because he wrote, True Grit's literary Western, but nobody knows the author. Larry McMurtry, people know. So you want the more contemporary connection to a successful literary person in that genre. Also with the way I spoke, I know we're running out of time. When I wanted to set scene, I tended to slow down a little bit. And when I wanted to set tension, I speeded up a little bit. There are times I leaned forward and made more direct eye contact and had a pause. And those things help create place markers for the points you need them to remember or to focus on. They're acting tricks. I used to be this really shy, introverted kid. I got over it, but I got over it through theater. I took some theater, went to theater classes, and it taught me a lot about body language. And actually, there's a friend of mine, Keith Strunk from the Liars Club in Philadelphia. We have a program called Act Like a Writer. We teach people how to be the public versions of themselves as writers. And one of the things we do is we do some acting techniques that help you in the verbal pitch. If you do a good verbal pitch, even if you make a stumble, like I forgot the title of the book, right? And everybody laughed. But if I fumbled through it, put the wrong title in, you'd be hung up on the fact that I was continuing with the wrong title. I had a friend, one of my students was doing a pitch, and he sat down and he was with this agent he really wanted to meet, Donald Moss, one of the great agents in the business. He blanked completely. He sat there like, and it could have been a disaster. But he said, I've been wanting to meet you for years, and right now I couldn't remember my own name, let alone what my book's about. Give me a second. They both cracked up, and it humanized him like that. Mm-hmm. And then Donald relaxed, and when he got back into it, they had a very comfortable conversation about the book. You can be human. You can't be Mr. Robot. You can't just recite at them. And for God's sake, don't read your pitch. I mean, reading a query letter to a group is one thing, but if you go into a verbal pitch and you're reading your pitch...
It's a bad day at the office.
Oh my God, is it? It's like, where's the human connection? I have a friend who owns a company called Smashwords, and he does this lecture. I've seen the lecture 4 times. He hands it out, he shows it on PowerPoint, and he reads it. I love the guy, but I want to kill him. It's so crushingly dull.
Service.
Yeah, I mean, I don't use notes when I teach. I don't use notes when I give talks. If you're a speaker, unless you're quoting facts and figures where you need to hit certain numbers or certain points, you should be the expert of your content.
You're speaking extemporaneously because you know your subject.
Even if you're recounting anecdotes you've told 100 times, it should always sound like it's the first time.
On that note, the author of True Grit was Charles Portis, and he doesn't seem to have really written anything else, which is why you don't remember.
Well, Harper Lee only wrote 1 book.
What?
No,
She wrote 2.
She wrote 1 good book.
Say that.
She didn't want the other one
Prevent
published.
query letter.
She didn't want the
She
other
didn't?
one. No, it was
Then why'd
published.
she write it?
It's a
She
rewrite.
wrote it before that
Yeah.
book, and she thought it was terrible. She wrote To Kill a Mockingbird, and then her sister and her lawyer had that book published against her will when she was in dementia and couldn't defend herself.
How rude.
Yes. So anyway, so the verbal pitch should be human. It should be a conversation. Even if it is not the first time you've given that pitch, it should sound like it. But there's a great way of practicing it. Get together with your friends. Do the exercise we just did. Not necessarily your own book. And one of the ways to kind of get in the groove, sit down and do a practice pitch for a book you love. Salem's Lot, Da Vinci Code, whatever. Pitch that book. Something you know. Like I have students pitch Wizard of Oz to me sometimes, which, by the way, is a perfect 3-act structure for a novel, if you ever know the 3-act structure thing. But by pitching something you're familiar with, you're more comfortable because you've read it or seen the movie or whatever. And then get around to practicing pitching your own book. Another way to do it is via Skype with a friend. But you should practice so that when you sit down with the agent, you look comfortable, and if you look comfortable, it says confident. That's a big thing. And sadly, that was a very fast 50 minutes.
Yeah, well, that's.
So, yes, so take business cards, send me an email, and I will send you that folder of stuff. Feel free to share it with your friends, because I would rather see as many writers as possible get it right.